The night talk show, television changed forever. What happens when sharp wit collides with sharp defiance? That question became reality on a night when Jon Stewart welcomed Meghan Markle to The Daily Show. What began as a routine late-night interview quickly spiraled into a tense confrontation, so tense that it shifted the mood of the audience and left a lasting mark on late-night television. The studio atmosphere was charged from the start. Stewart, known for blending comedy with cutting political critique, took his seat with a playful grin, ready to spar with a guest. His introduction was light-hearted. Former actress, former royal, current podcaster, and someone who always makes headlines, Meghan Markle, welcome. Markle entered with composure. Crisp blouse, tailored skirt, and a smile that looked practiced but restrained. The applause was polite, not overwhelming. Her opening words set the tone. It's always nice to be given yet another opportunity to explain myself. The remark drew a flicker of surprise from Stewart and a ripple of nervous laughter from the crowd. Tension in every word. From there, the exchange teetered between conversation and confrontation. Stewart asked about her foundation and its mission of service. Markle's answer was pointed. Nothing about service is meant to be fulfilling for me personally. It's about others. She added, almost as an aside, that someone with Stewart's background of holding leaders accountable should understand that. The audience stirred. Stewart, smiling tightly, pressed on. He pivoted to the criticism that Markle often revisits her grievances with the British press and royal establishment, asking whether this focus risks overshadowing broader issues such as racial equity or mental health. Markle's response was sharp. Overshadows? Or maybe it highlights them in ways people like you don't grasp. You make jokes at others' expense. I speak my truth. There's a difference. The crowd, torn between support and discomfort, murmured in reaction. Stewart tried to soften the moment, but Markle cut in before he could regain control. If I repeat myself, it's not self-centered, it's survival. Comedy meets confrontation. Stewart attempted to move the conversation toward lighter ground, turning to her podcast. But again, critique crept in. Some saw her show as self-promotion more than advocacy. Markle didn't hold back. Critics usually write from basements in their pajamas, she said coolly. They haven't lived what I've lived. Their opinions are noise. It was clear by then that this was no typical late-night banter. The audience, once buzzing with anticipation, now shifted uneasily between nervous laughter and stunned silence. Why it matters. Moments like this raise bigger questions. Where is the line between holding public figures accountable and amplifying their voices? Stewart, a master of satire, pushed for answers. Markle, often criticised for defending herself too fiercely, refused to yield. This was more than just an interview. It became a symbol of the broader cultural clash over who gets to tell their story and how that story is received. And so, the night ended not with easy laughs, but with lingering unease. The clash between humour and defiance left viewers wondering, was this an interview gone wrong, or a raw, unfiltered glimpse into the price of public life? What do you think? Was Meghan standing her ground, or was Jon right to challenge her approach? When the laughter stopped, late-night shows thrive on wit, banter, and quick jabs. But on this night, the audience watched as the usual rhythm broke down. What began as a playful exchange between Jon Stewart and Meghan Markle slowly shifted into a high-stakes verbal duel. After an earlier tense back and forth, Stewart tried to regain balance with humour. Fair enough, but you do realise this is late-night television, right? Noise is kind of our thing. Markle's reply was immediate, her tone sharp. Then maybe I'm in the wrong place. The room froze. For the first time, the familiar atmosphere of The Daily Show felt unstable. Even during the commercial break, the air hung heavy. Producers whispered in the control booth, and the audience sensed that something unusual, perhaps unprecedented, was unfolding. The clash of narratives. Returning from the break, Stewart introduced Markle again, masking the tension with forced cheer. She smiled, but her eyes betrayed her mood. Honesty is rare in media, Jon. Maybe that's why I always end up being the difficult guest. The laugh from the audience was uneasy, more nervous than amused. Then Stewart asked the question many critics had posed. Were Meghan and Harry truly breaking free from royal constraints, or simply replacing one institution with another, trading palaces for multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify? Markle's response was unwavering. Critics seem allergic to successful women. If I disappeared, they'd call me irrelevant. If I succeed, they call me a hypocrite. Stewart pressed gently but firmly. Couldn't some people see it as profiting from personal grievances while living a lifestyle far removed from the public she claimed to speak for? Markle didn't flinch. Interpretation is their problem, not mine. I'm not responsible for how people twist my reality. That's what tabloids are for. And you, Jon, you've built a career out of twisting truths into punchlines. The audience gasped. Stewart chuckled stiffly, replying that jokes were his job, but at least they didn't come at the expense of family ties. The jab revealed cracks in his composure. From debate to accusation. The conversation turned darker when Stewart asked if Markle's frequent retelling of her struggles overshadowed those with fewer resources. Could she do more to highlight people without access to private doctors or security details? Markle leaned forward, her voice cutting. So now pain only matters if you live in a one-bedroom apartment with no heat. Mental health doesn't check your bank account before it crushes you. The audience applauded, louder this time, but the clapping was mixed with unease. Stewart clarified that he wasn't dismissing her pain, but questioning whether her platform could widen its reach. Markle laughed bitterly. So now I'm supposed to be the spokesperson for everyone's suffering. Forgive me if I don't take career advice from a man whose legacy is comedic monologues. The venom in her words was undeniable. Stewart's trademark smirk faltered for the first time. He leaned on his desk, his tone softer but more serious. For years, you've criticised the royal family. Some call it bravery. Others call it airing dirty laundry. Do you think there's a point where advocacy becomes revenge? The studio fell silent, the tension palpable. A deeper question. When Markle finally responded, she cut through the hush with a steady voice, dismissing the word revenge but refusing to retreat. The duel had reached its peak. Stewart attempting to balance accountability with civility, Markle fiercely protecting her narrative from being reframed. It was no longer about jokes or sound bites. This was about ownership of pain, the price of speaking out, and the collision between entertainment and advocacy. And so we are left with a question. When public figures turn personal struggle into public testimony, where should the line be drawn between sharing for change and sharing for vindication? When questions turned into combat. Please, Jon, if I wanted revenge, you'd know. With that single line, Meghan Markle shifted the interview from tense to combative. Her words, cool and cutting, landed like a warning shot. What she had shared publicly, she insisted, was only a fraction of what she had endured. And yet, the moment she spoke, she accused, men like Stewart leaned on predictable labels: bitter, difficult, ungrateful. Stewart sat up straighter, no longer smirking. What's tiresome, he countered, is that every answer sounds like a lecture about being misunderstood. I'm not your enemy. I'm asking questions the public deserves answers to. The audience gasped. For the first time, Stewart's patience looked frayed. Accusations and counterstrikes. Markle leaned in, her eyes cold. Questions or accusations disguised as curiosity? You've been condescending since I sat down. Maybe it makes you feel clever to put a woman in her place on live television. Stewart exhaled, holding back frustration. That's not what this is. I've interviewed presidents, veterans, whistleblowers. You're not singled out for being a woman. You're challenged because your story is at the centre of every headline. That brings scrutiny. Markle's silence lasted a beat too long. Then, with a mocking clap, she fired back. Congratulations, Jon. You've joined the club of men who think challenging me makes them brave. Tell me, does it feel heroic to spar with a duchess? The laughter that followed wasn't friendly. It was jagged, awkward. Stewart's face hardened. I don't need to feel heroic. My job is to ask what others won't. And right now, what I see isn't an activist. It's someone who can't handle being asked if her choices match her words. The silence in the studio was suffocating. Markle's mask of poise slipped, her voice low, dripping disdain. Careful, Jon. You might regret this little ambush. The set no longer felt like a comedy stage. It had transformed into an arena. A war of definitions. Stewart tried to wrestle back control. We're back with Meghan Markle, he announced with a strained grin. And, well, it's been a spirited discussion. Markle leaned in with a razor-thin smile. Spirited? That's generous. I'd call it an ambush. The crowd sucked in a collective breath. Stewart raised his hands in mock surrender. Meghan, it's an interview, not tea with biscuits. Interviews involve questions. Her reply was swift. Questions? Or carefully disguised attacks? Maybe you don't know the difference because you've spent your career hiding behind jokes. A nervous laugh rippled through the audience. The core dispute. Stewart exhaled, then sharpened his tone. You've said your goal is to help others, but why do all your initiatives, from your foundation to your podcast, circle back to you? Your brand, your story, your struggles. Isn't true service supposed to be larger than the individual? Markle tilted her head, pretending to be amused. So, now I'm not allowed to use my own voice? Would you prefer I stay quiet, smile politely, and let others take credit? That's convenient, especially for people who'd rather women remain invisible. Stewart tapped his pen, patience thinning. That's not it. I'm saying advocacy shouldn't always return to you. If every story is Meghan Markle versus the world, doesn't that weaken the cause? Her smirk sharpened. Weaken? Or maybe it strengthens it, because I'm willing to take the blows others won't. Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is an audience that only respects women once they've been broken. Her words landed with a chilling weight. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Stewart tried to pivot yet again, but it was clear. This was no interview. This was a battle over who gets to define truth, purpose, and power. The interview reaches boiling point. The breaking moment came when Jon Stewart raised the issue that had followed Meghan Markle for years. Let's talk about specifics, he said carefully. In one of the most watched interviews of the decade, you accused the royal family of racism. But when pressed for names, you declined. Don't vague allegations without details risk damaging the very cause you say you're fighting for. The temperature in the room dropped. Markle's face stiffened, her reply sharp. So, you think I should expose people on live television, paint targets on their backs and feed them to the tabloids? That's not accountability, Jon. That's a witch hunt. Stewart didn't back down. No, that's called responsibility. You can't light a fire and then pretend you didn't strike the match. A murmur swept across the audience. Markle leaned forward, her voice cutting. What's absurd is a man who's never lived through racism telling me how I should talk about it. You don't qualify to dictate my truth. The gasps were audible. Stewart's trademark grin slipped away. His tone grew measured, but harder. You're right. I'll never understand racism firsthand. But I do understand accountability. That means evidence, clarity, facts. It doesn't mean broad accusations packaged as victimhood. It doesn't mean turning pain into a personal brand. Lines crossed. Markle laughed harshly. Victimhood? Your buzzword of the night? Congratulations, Jon. You've become the tabloids you claim to criticize. At least they don't pretend to care about fairness. Stewart calmly placed his pen aside. The difference is, I'm not chasing headlines. I don't monetize pity. My work is to challenge stories that don't hold up. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Challenge or tear down? Because from here it looks like you're more interested in humiliation than truth. Tell me, Do you interrogate all your guests this way, or only the women who refuse to smile and nod? The audience shifted uncomfortably. A whisper passed from one seat to another. Nobody laughed. Advocacy or self-promotion? Stewart leaned forward, voice low. You knew exactly what this show was. I ask hard questions. If you wanted applause and easy praise, maybe you should have gone on a breakfast lifestyle segment instead. Markle leaned in, closing the gap, her tone poisonous. Here's your problem, Jon. You hate that I don't crumble. You like making people sweat. But tonight, you're the one losing control. And maybe that terrifies you. Stewart's jaw tightened. What actually terrifies me is watching someone with enormous privilege insist on being the perpetual victim, dismissing anyone who challenges that story. That's not bravery, it's theatre. The words landed like a gavel. Markle's composure cracked. Her voice rose, trembling with rage. Theatre? You think it's an act when I talk about wanting to end my life? When I describe abuse and lies that nearly destroyed me? You smug hypocrite, pretending you care while sneering at what doesn't fit your definition of suffering. Stewart's reply was cold steel. I think you've blurred the line between advocacy and self-promotion. You've built a brand on grievances, and I think you know that. Markle slammed her hand down on the chair, her voice shaking. You don't know me. You don't know what I've endured, and you sure as hell don't get to sit there, cushioned in comfort, deciding which parts of my pain are valid. The room was frozen. Every word felt like a fuse burning toward detonation. The cameras kept rolling, but the air was no longer entertainment. It was trial by fire. And everyone in the studio knew this wouldn't end with reconciliation. It could only end in flames. The night finally collapsed. The tension inside the studio had grown unbearable. The audience sat rigid, unsure whether to breathe or clap. Meghan Markle's hand still shook after striking the armrest, while Jon Stewart, usually the master of late-night composure, looked worn, his movements mechanical as he fidgeted with his papers. Breaking the silence, he leaned forward. Let's be direct, Meghan. You've said you walked away from the royal family for peace, privacy, a chance at a normal life. Yet, since then, you've appeared in documentaries, podcasts, primetime interviews. Do you understand why people think the spotlight was what you wanted all along? Her laugh was sharp, dismissive. Ah, yes, the overused argument. You wanted privacy, but you talk to the press. Privacy isn't silence. It's having control over what's shared and what stays personal. Clearly, that nuance is too complex for some to grasp. The remark drew a wave of murmurs. Stewart's jaw tightened. I know what boundaries mean, he replied. But when every boundary comes with another multi-million-dollar contract, people begin asking whether it's privacy you want or profit. Her eyes narrowed, voice rising. Profit? Try survival. I built a life where my family could breathe without being hunted. Forgive me for not sitting in New York behind a desk, trading in jokes while others handle the real danger. The audience reacted instantly, a mix of boos and gasps. The accusation of exceptionalism. Stewart pushed on, his patience thinning. I've sat here with veterans, generals, and leaders who've endured life and death scrutiny. Not once did they demand sympathy for critical headlines. Why should your struggle be treated as uniquely untouchable? Markle's smile curled. Because it's mine. That's what infuriates you. A woman refusing to stay silent, refusing to bow, refusing to play along with men who think sarcasm equals wisdom. The crowd hissed with tension. Stewart blinked, visibly stung, then steadied himself. His voice dropped lower, more deliberate. What bothers me isn't your defiance. It's mistaking defiance for depth. You claim to champion others, but every cause circles back to you. That isn't service. It's self-reflection. The silence was suffocating. Even the camera crew looked hesitant. Walking out. Markle suddenly stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I won't sit here and tolerate this ambush. I expected fairness. Instead, I get a witch trial. Stewart remained seated, hands pressed flat on the desk. You expected applause? And when you didn't get it, you lashed out. That isn't persecution, Meghan. That's reality. Her face flushed red. Reality? She shouted. Reality is a smear campaign that nearly destroyed me. Reality is being torn apart while institutions stayed silent. Reality is men like you thinking that silencing me makes you noble. Finally, Stewart rose, his voice booming over the crowd. Enough. This isn't about nobility. It isn't about tabloids or gender. It's about accountability. And if you can't answer questions without turning them into attacks, then maybe you don't belong in this chair. The audience gasped. Markle's lips parted, but nothing came out. Then, trembling with rage, she spat. This was a setup. From the moment I arrived, you wanted a spectacle. Well, congratulations. You got your viral clip. Stewart didn't flinch. No, I wanted dialogue. You made it theatre. Markle straightened her jacket, scanned the stunned room, and declared, I don't need this show. I don't need you. And frankly, this stage doesn't deserve me. The response was uneven. Scattered claps, louder boos. Stewart turned to the cameras, his face carved in stone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's rare that we have to end early because a guest refuses to continue. Tonight is one of those nights. He glanced at the wings. Stage manager, escort her out. And with that, the uneasy spectacle was over. The final walkout. The studio seemed frozen in disbelief. Security personnel edged forward cautiously, uncertain whether to intervene. Meghan Markle recoiled instantly, her voice rising to a near shout. Don't touch me. I'll leave when I decide, not when I'm told. With that, she turned sharply and strode off stage, her heels hammering against the floor, each step echoing through the stunned silence. For a long beat, no one moved. Then, Stewart straightened his tie, took a long breath, and fixed his eyes on the camera. Well, he said dryly, that wasn't exactly in the script. A wry half-smile flickered before he added, I've done hundreds of interviews over my career, and I've seen things get tense, but I've never had to remove a guest from this stage. Tonight will be remembered. The audience broke into applause. Not cheerful, but sharp, uncertain. Some clapped in support of Stewart, others out of sheer disbelief at what they had witnessed. A legacy in ruins. As the broadcast cut to commercial, it was clear the evening had left a permanent mark. What was meant to be a straightforward conversation had ended in a storm. Markle once again had exited an institution in flames, and Stewart, long celebrated for his restraint, had finally shown that even he had a breaking point. The episode would be replayed, debated, and dissected for years to come. Was this a necessary moment of accountability, or an on-air ambush?